Okay, second attempt. I'll try to continue where I left it. My computer is just too slow. So portable, durable, scarce, hard to counterfeit, acceptable. Money also has to be uniform, which means that, for example, if you have 2 coins, 2 banknotes, whatever you use, has to be the same, exactly the same. So it can be trusted. So we know that a certain coin has a, for example, when we use gold coins or silver coins, we had to make sure that they had the exact, like if you had 2 gold coins, it was important that they had the exact same gold content. Okay, that's the idea of uniformity. And finally, money must be divisible, which means that it's possible to divide it into smaller units. So, for example, when we think about banknotes, you have banknotes of, let's say, 100 francs, 50 francs, 20 francs, 10 francs, and so on. And then you have coins. Basically, it's important because, well, imagine if we only had banknotes that 500 francs banknotes. Well, clearly you see the problem. You will not, most items will be, this would mean that all items would need to be sold at either 500 francs, 1,000 francs, 1,500 francs, and that doesn't work. You don't want to pay 500 francs for French fries, for example. So that's why you need to have different banknotes or different coins, whatever you use as a form of money, so you can basically find the right amount of money for any good or service. Goods or services that are worth very little, but also goods and services that are worth very big amounts. Okay, so these are essentially the characteristics of money. So you see, it's not stuff that you can do with money. That's essentially a list of desirable features of assets that can be used as a form of money. Now, to conclude this video, we need to talk about the different forms of money, especially the way in which money, the form of money have evolved over time. So in very primitive economies, the first forms of money were what we call commodity money. So we could use some commodities. So for example, shells. Shells are quite famous for having been used as a form of money. That's an example. Then we had you could actually regard it as a form of commodity money, but you had like precious metals. Mostly silver and gold, which again, gold and silver are a commodity, but like basically before using gold and silver, we use other stuff like shells, for example, or precious stones or stuff like that. Then we had, much later, banknotes. And in fact, in the past, when banknotes were first introduced, this was just a piece of paper that gave you a claim on a certain quantity of gold that was held by a bank, okay? So for example, you go to the bank with gold, you deposit the gold at the bank, and the bank gives you a bank note that says, okay, basically, this piece of paper gives you the right to collect 2 ounces of gold from the bank, okay? And then instead of trading gold with buyers, instead of having buyers and sellers trading gold, because it was just easier to trade pieces of paper, people were trading banknotes. But for a very long period of time, these banknotes, you could actually convert them into gold if you went to the bank. The banknotes. Okay, so we had coins. Here, most of the coins. And here we had banknotes. Then, mostly happening at the second half of the 20th century, electronic money. electronic money, e-money, that sometimes we call it digital money, but I prefer electronic money. Well, that's basically the amount of money that you have on your bank account. Okay, it's not physical. It's just lines of codes on a computer that just records how much money you have, but it's just electronic. Okay, electronic money, and of course, electronic money can be used using some checkbooks or some debit cards. So careful, checkbooks, debit cards, they are not really money. They are just some instruments that you use to access electronic money. Again, one example is like the bank deposits. Bank deposits are a form of e-money, electronic money. That can be used with checkbooks and debit cards. Okay, this also includes electronic money. This also includes things like e-wallets, stuff like PayPal, for example. Okay, but in fact, what happens if you have a PayPal account is that you'll have a PayPal balance, but if you want to credit your PayPal balance, you have to transfer money from your bank account to PayPal. So it's just another form of e-money. Then, if you have this question, a good conclusion would be to talk about cryptocurrencies. But with a big question mark. Can we regard cryptocurrencies like Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies, you know, that there are thousands, but the Bitcoin is the most famous one. Should we regard cryptocurrencies as a form of money? No, it's not even a debate. When you think about it, when we defined money, we said that this is something that must be widely accepted as a means of payment. I can't really think of any country where it's widely accepted, or definitely not in European countries. I believe that maybe in Japan there are more places. If I remember well, there was, I think it's Venezuela, who wanted to make it legal tender. Making legal tender means that the government forces sellers to accept a particular type of money. For example, in most countries, banknotes are legal tender, which means that a seller can't refuse to sell like a good or service to you in exchange for a banknote. Okay. In the past, it was important because some sellers were reluctant to accept banknotes. For example, the governments made banknotes legal tender. Right. Cryptocurrencies, are they a type of money? No, because they are not a medium of exchange. They are not a store of value because the price of cryptocurrencies fluctuates very much, and therefore that makes them very bad unit of account. So we should not regard cryptocurrencies as a form of money. And in fact, and I will conclude on this, for a very long time, banknotes, for example, they were convertible into gold. This was the case until something that was called the gold standard. I would need to check the dates, but I believe this was until 1943. I'm not sure, but there was something called the gold standard, which basically made banknotes convertible into gold. So the value of a banknote was directly tied to the value of gold. Okay, so people were quite trustworthy that banknotes had value because they could be readily exchanged against gold at a fixed exchange rate. But this disappeared. Again, I'm no expert, but I believe that this was when we had the Bretton Woods system, where basically currencies were not, or banknotes, for example, they were not readily, you could not really exchange them directly against gold. So the only thing that made banknotes valuable is the government's promise that they could be used to buy goods and services. That's it, basically, because otherwise it's just a piece of paper, right? So what makes a banknote valuable is that you trust that you will be able to use it to buy goods and services. And why you trust that that's going to be the case? Because the government tells you that it's going to be accepted, because the government makes banknotes legal tender, forces sellers to accept them. This type of money, which has no intrinsic value, intrinsic means no value in itself, like a coin, banknote, they have no value in themselves, unlike commodity money. The only thing that makes them valuable is that you trust they're gonna be able to buy goods and services with these banknotes. We call that fiat money. Fiat basically means trust. So banknotes, coins, these are examples of fiat money, because they entirely derive their value from the trust that you have in the ability of those pieces of paper to buy valuable goods and services. Okay, that's about it. So what you have to remember, well, first, before money, barter economies and the problem that we face with the double coincidence of wants that just impede economic development. Then the definition of money, any asset that can be widely used to buy goods and services. The 3 or 4 functions of money: a medium of exchange, means of payments, store of value or store of wealth, a unit of account or measure of value, and, if you want, a standard for deferred payment. Then the different characteristics has to be uniform, scarce, divisible, portable, hard to counterfeit, durable. I hope I have them all, which are like the desirable features for money. Then the different forms of money, like commodity money, precious metals, especially gold and silver coins. Then we had banknotes that were initially convertible into gold. Then you had bank deposits and electronic money. And of course, remember that once banknotes were no longer convertible into gold, then money became what we call fiat money, where the only reason for which it's valuable is because the government makes these banknotes legal tender, and therefore they derive value from the fact that you can use them to buy goods and services. Conclude talking about cryptocurrencies, ask the question, is it a form of money? And explain that no, because it's not widely accepted as a means of payment, and because it is not a good store of value because the price changes very, very much. And that's good.